Hello, EduMagicians. Welcome to the EduMagic podcast with your host, Dr. Sam Fessich. Dr. Sam is a professor of education, author of EduMagic, and a pumpkin spice latte fan. This podcast is designed for pre-service teachers. Remember, friends, teaching doesn't begin at graduation, but during that first class at 8 a.m. Let's get this party started.
I'm Stacey Lindis from Podcast PD, a part of the Education Podcast Network, just like the show you're listening to now. Shows on the network are individually owned and opinions expressed may not reflect others. Find other interesting education podcasts at edupodcastnetwork.com.
So I put out on Instagram a little poll that said, what questions do you have about student teaching or teaching in general? And I have questions here that I'm going to be sharing with you. The first one has to do with, how do I manage a social life? So here are the two questions. My biggest question is honestly, how to manage the work and social life aspect of teaching. I've changed it somewhat over the year of pre-student teaching and student teaching in kindergarten, but I'm still struggling. And then the next question is kind of related. Mine is how to set boundaries for yourself between school and home. I don't have to worry so much about it right now, but I know myself, I know I'll struggle with it in the future when I have my own classroom. So these two questions relate together because they're about setting boundaries and how to have time for yourself as an educator and time for yourself as the person that you are. So my suggestion for the two of you who have that question and you're struggling with the social life and struggling with teaching and how to balance it all is first to know that there is no such thing as balance. This is a unicorn. You're never going to have a 50-50% balance, teaching, work life, social life. It's never going to be equal. Some days there's going to be more than others, but you need to schedule in that time for yourself and time to have a social life. So that being said, choose a day of the week that you leave on contract time. So find a schedule that works for you and the way that you work with your teaching schedule and with your commute. So find a schedule that works for you. Put in time for you. My colleague calls this purple time. And she looks at her calendar and she looks to make sure, hey, do I have enough purple time in my calendar? That could be something like leaving enough time in the morning to grab her favorite cup of coffee, being able to pack her lunch and have a healthy lunch to eat, or pack enough snacks throughout the day so she's not getting hangry at 2:00, right? We've all been there. So setting boundaries, putting in time on your calendar throughout the week where you're investing in yourself. So for a college student, that might look like getting meals with friends or leaving enough time in your commute from on campus to grab your favorite cup of coffee, to chat with a friend over coffee. So being able to set in time for you and look at your calendar at the beginning of the week, and set in that time. Setting in boundaries is also very important. Being protective of your time, very, very important to do. Whenever I was a first-year teacher, I would go in early, stay late, volunteer for all of the things, and I never protected my time. I thought if I did all the things, then that would make me a fabulous teacher, and that's not true. You want to make sure that you're protecting your time. So if it's not a heck yes, I want to do this activity, or I am so excited, this is really going to help me out, think about it. Take some time, take a breath, take a beat. Say, let me consider this. Look at your calendar. Do you have time to do it? Do you have time to do it well? So that's really important for our college student friends that are in the crowd listening. And if you're taking on a little too much in volunteering or taking on leadership roles, really look at your schedule. What can you do and what can you do well? Because you can do a lot of things, but not really invest your time into it. Or you can do a few things very well. So be picky, choosy. And I encourage you to think about that as a new teacher as well. Whenever you're thinking about volunteering for committees and everything like that, think about what's really speaking to your heart. It might be a lot of things, but what can you do very well? All right. Up next, we have another question. Finding the balance of managing classroom behavior, but not having too many roles or appearing mean. So classroom management, that is a big topic. And if we think about classroom management, instead of thinking about roles, thinking about expectations. What are your expectations for your students? And for some of our young learners, it might have to be describing what does that look like? What does that sound like? What does that feel like? So being descriptive with those expectations, reviewing expectations throughout the year, because sometimes when we come back from a break or a long weekend, we might have to review those expectations. How do we enter the room? How do we exit the room? What are our procedures? So that's important to think about. Also, whenever we think about managing classroom behavior, it all begins with relationships, getting to know our students as unique individuals in our classrooms. That being said, knowing that getting to know our students does not end that first day, that first week of classes, it's something we get to keep doing as teachers. And if you've ever heard me speak about this topic, if I've ever came to your KDP meeting or anything like that and shared about classroom management for real, the first thing in the for real part, relationships, setting up those relationships, connecting with your students as a person, no matter what grade you are teaching, you greeting students at the door, very empowering, greeting them by name. So when they come into your classroom, they know that they are welcomed, they are appreciated, and they are valued by you. And this is fantastic because you can then use those relationships to work on those expectations. Everything flows from relationships. So get to know your students. Continue to get to know your students and make sure when they enter your classroom that they know that you see them and they are noticed. And friends, that is so powerful. So as long as you get to know your students, set those expectations alongside your students. This is a great strategy. I've seen this used across social media where teachers and students will come together and make a classroom constitution. In this classroom, and then they talk about what are some things that they do in this classroom. They respect each other. They listen to one another. They value one another, and they talk about what each of these areas mean. So you might want to think about that, setting your expectations alongside your students. All right, question number 3. How can we do a good job of trying new things and making our practicums our own thing without ruining established classroom rules and procedures? I am so nervous to try things in case it causes issues for my mentor teacher. This is from a student teacher who's specializing in elementary science, and she's heading into her second practicum. All right, so she wants to try new things. She wants to kind of start making lessons her own, but she doesn't want to disrupt what her mentor teacher is already doing. If you can try out some new things in the classroom, whether that is a strategy, a tool, or a technique that you've been learning about. However, you just don't want to go in the first day and turn everything upside down, right? Right. So you want to make sure that when you're trying out new things, that you have that conversation with your cooperating teacher. Just be open and upfront about it. Say, you know what, I learned about this strategy during my student teaching or during practicum or during this one methods class, and I would love to try it out in your classroom. Here's what it is. Here's how I plan to use it. What do you think about it? Do you think this would be appropriate for your students? How do you think your students would do with it? So have a plan to share the strategy. How is it going to benefit the students? How is it going to benefit the teacher? Why do you want to try it? Making sure you have a complete plan instead of just going in with, hey, I'm going to try this awesome thing, and hopefully it works. So go in with a plan, have a clear expectation for that plan. How is it going to benefit everybody? What's the reason why behind using that tool, that technique, that strategy? And then just having an open communication with your cooperating teacher. I think that would be the best plan there. So go in, conversation with a plan and an expectation about this tool or technique or trying out something. All right, here is our 4th question out of 5. What are some ways you can cope or things you can do when you and your co-op have completely different teaching philosophies? My co-op is very traditional and I'm modern in terms of classroom management, social, emotional instruction. So this is another interesting question. So please know that you and your cooperating teacher may or may not get along every day, and that is okay. You guys might be besties and grabbing coffee in the morning, or you might just be greeting each other, and that's okay. You're going to learn from this experience. So instead of thinking about, oh, this teacher is really traditional and I would do it this way, look to see, hey, my teacher's using a lecture style. What are some benefits of this? How are the students responding? And then reflect, what are some ways that you can interject some of your strategies into that? So for example, if a teacher's doing lecture style with a PowerPoint and students are doing guided notes, maybe whenever you pick up that subject, you can, keep the presentation, but put it in a Nearpod. And now students have some formative assessment checks for understanding. So you're keeping the content similar style, but now you're putting your own flavor on it. Or if your teacher's using a lot of worksheets, that is fine. You might want to think about how can you put your own spin on it. So maybe instead of handing out everybody a worksheet, you can put the worksheet up on the interactive whiteboard and have students come up and annotate it. Or you can use tools like WordWall or Lumio or Wiser or TeacherMade to make that worksheet digital. So you're keeping the same content, but you're putting your own spin on it, where you can make it more interactive. And when you start to use some of these new techniques, these new strategies, just explain to your cooperating teacher that you would like to try these out. Here's why you'd like to try it out. Here's how you think it would help your students. And then give it a shot. Reflect on it. See what their thoughts are on it, and reflect on your own. Do not go to your cooperating teacher and say, I think you're doing this wrong, and here's how I would do it. Because we are pre-professionals. We are still learning. As teachers, we are always learning. Keep that in mind. And you're going to learn from this experience too. So look to see what are some benefits of the strategy that the teacher's using. What are some ways you would add your own to it? How would you add your own flavor to it? Reflect on that. And think about, what are some ways you can use that strategy, but also put your own spin on it. And just have a conversation with your cooperating teacher. Say, all right, I'd like to try out this strategy. Here's what I would like to do and why. All right, here's our last question. What are some ways you can transform worksheets or present worksheets in an engaging manner without differing from worksheets? My co-op loves worksheets. Okay. All right. Using worksheets isn't always a bad thing. We want to make sure when we're using our worksheets, we're using them mindfully. Kind of like I mentioned in the previous question, you can take that worksheet, because we don't want to differ from that worksheet, like the question said, and you can put it into something like Wiser or TeacherMade or ClassKick or WordWall, and add in interactive features to it. So it's not just here's a worksheet, you write on it, but here's some interactive features that could auto-grade some pieces, give students different ways to respond, like a drawing or a multiple choice or an open-ended response with a text box. There's lots of ways that students can respond within that worksheet, but it keeps that same question, and you can change up how they interact with it. So I would suggest trying out some technology when it comes to keeping the worksheet content, but a little bit more engaging. You can also take that worksheet and present it up on the board like an interactive whiteboard lesson with students using something like Lumio or Nearpod or Pear Deck for formative assessment pieces built right in. So I hope that helps. All right, friends, so we talked through 5 big questions. One was related to how do I set boundaries for my social life and my teaching life? Another one was how do I balance classroom management without appearing mean? Our third question was, how do I do a good job of trying new things without ruining the classroom routines my co-op has already set up? Number 4 was, what do I do if my co-op is very traditional and I'm not so much? And our last one, our 5th one, was, what can I do with all the worksheets? How do I make them more interactive? Friends, if you have questions or comments, I would love to hear your questions. So just direct message me over on Instagram at SFECICH. And in this episode, I mentioned the classroom management for real presentation. If you would like a copy of that, this is only for my podcast listeners. So just DM me, Classroom Management for Real, over on Instagram or Twitter, and I'd be happy to send you that presentation so you can get a little sneak peek about the content that's in there. It starts with relationships and it ends with L, let it go. So what does E and A stand for? You'll have to DM me to find out. All right, friends, I hope you have a fantastic day. And remember, you have the Edu Magic within you.
And there you have it, Edu Magicians. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and share it with your friends. For more Edu Magic, check out sfessage.com and follow Dr. Sam on Twitter and Instagram at sfessage. Until next time, you have the Edu Magic within you.